Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live from Monday to Friday on CGTN. We begin our show today in the U.S. with a scandal over how wealthy parents have allegedly taken part in a scheme to let their children into top U.S. universities. Prosecutors accuse these parents of paying a total of $25 million to a college admissions consultant over 7 years to get their teens accepted to the best schools. Here's how it went down.
Cheating, bribery, racketeering. It sounds like a made-for-TV crime movie. This is not reality TV, but a serious legal case for two of the parents in the college admission scandal, actresses Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin. They appeared before a Boston federal court along with the other accused on Wednesday to face charges in the college bribery scandal. Last month, federal investigators bared the elaborate scheme which allegedly secured slots for the children of the accused at elite U.S. universities. A total of 50 people, including 33 parents and college athletic coaches, have been charged. It was the biggest college admission scheme ever prosecuted by the U.S. Justice Department. Loughlin, who appeared in the 1980s and 90s sitcom Full House, along with her husband Mossimo Giannulli, is accused of paying $500,000 US to get their daughters admitted as recruits to the USC crew team, even though neither was a rower. Huffman, the Emmy-winning star of ABC's Desperate Housewives, is accused of paying $15,000 that she allegedly disguised as a charitable donation to cheat on her daughter's college entrance exam. Top schools including the University of Southern California, Yale, Georgetown, and Stanford have been named in the scandal. The universities blame rogue employees rather than problems with the admissions process. Students who got into these schools through the traditional route seemed ambivalent.
This bribery scandal is really in the same vein as a lot of the other conversations that are happening around like access and privilege at elite universities and what it takes to get here.
There's a whole thing where they also take donors' money to sort of let students in, but I don't really think it's equivalent.
The criminal investigation is still underway, as is the U.S. debate over access to higher education.
So what does the U.S. college admissions scandal say about having a fair shake to take into top U.S. universities? Let's loop in our panelists in Washington, D.C. Christopher Chambers, a professor of journalism at Georgetown University. Welcome, Professor. Long time no see. Also in D.C., we have Brandon Andrews, entrepreneur and former Capitol Hill staffer. In our Beijing studio, Professor Liu Baocheng, the Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics from the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome, Professor, as well. Want to start with you, Professor Chambers. Tell us about the nature of this scandal. Will the prosecution of one Hollywood star really solve the problem?
Well, speaking as an academic, as one of the named institutions, I hope it does. The problem is that the Hollywood connection is very good for inflaming passions and for getting people to watch, but we need to understand that there were many, many more parents who were very prominent business people, hedge fund managers, manufacturing magnates, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just Hollywood. Hollywood is there to kind of excite people. I think it has put the United States higher education system under a microscope, as well it should be, because as you heard one of the students say, we are having discussions now about privilege and access, and I think this breaks this wide open.
Is it about a discussion about privilege and access, Mr. Andrews?
Well, it certainly is. You know, one, I, like millions of other students in high school, worked hard to figure out how to navigate the college admissions process without the benefit of resources like wealth or relationships to help myself get into college. I did it the old-fashioned way, so to speak. And the other thing that really troubled me about this scandal is the way in which it happened. I was also a Division I track athlete. I competed primarily in the triple jump at Oral Roberts University. And to think that high school athletes, about 6% of high school athletes can expect to compete in college at any level. And when you're talking about elite colleges, Division I colleges, which most of these schools are, you're talking about 1 to 3% of high school athletes that go on to compete. To think that one of those very, very good high school athletes could be robbed of an opportunity to continue their athletic pursuit by someone who really hasn't done anything, really made me, one, angry, but also made me think, what are the ways that policymakers here in Washington, D.C., and the academic community more generally, what are things that can be done to address the issue?
But the question really is, what can they do? Now you have a very interesting pyramid system, isn't it? The top universities, most of them are private ones, and they have their own ways of deciding as to what their admission policies are. Of course, these policies have to be fair, even regarding the funding issue. So, Professor Chambers, do you think there's likely to be change at all, or only a scandal, and then everything back to what it was?
Well, there are so many things wrong with higher education right now in the United States. This is one aspect of it. There are some changes in some of the standardized testing, security measures that are being looked at now, even the role of some of these standardized tests in admissions. You also have a separate issue, as the other panelists talked about college athletics. There's an entirely different set of problems and scandals in big-time, big-money college sports in America. So there's that problem, too. So we're juggling a lot of terrible problems here in higher ed. And I really don't see, beyond very small Band-Aid kind of fixes, what we can do right now.
Mr. Andrews, will the so-called issue of wealth in the college education change, really, this time as a result of this?
Well, here's the reality, Tien, and whether folks are in the United States or China or wherever else around the world, as long as there are people with means, they're going to use those resources, whether they're wealth or relationships, to do what they want to do, especially when you talk about putting their children in a position to succeed. We should have rules in place, and we should enforce those rules, and so hopefully there will be some punishment meted out in the wake of this. However, I think the primary focus going forward should be, how do we ensure that we are building pathways to opportunity for people that have less means or people that have no means, and also thinking about higher education in general. Is a four-year degree the right kind of education for this 21st century workforce? Or are there other opportunities, other options that are there? Last year, I managed a tour called the Tech to Wealth Tour. We traveled with Beyonce and Jay-Z's On the Run tour and did tech events with DJ Young Guru. He talked about technology education. We got coding scholarships from WeWork and Flatiron School. That's one way to get at this education issue. Education is key to building wealth, but I think we have to make sure policymakers here in D.C. and others need to make sure that it's the right kind of education going forward.
Well, Professor Liu, from your perspective, of course, this is a scandal going on in the U.S., but college examination is a controversial issue in any country, China included as well. How is this scandal, in a way, becoming a wake-up call? After all, you know, there are two things. One is how the U.S. system is being established. The other is this corruption case. This is a corruption case, and it's a criminal case, in fact. But it's different from the discussion that the other two gentlemen were talking about, which is the issue of wealth that has been long existing in college examination and entrance. So how do you see these two issues?
I think there are two questions. One is that, should we have the same standard between public school and private schools, where private schools have a financial pressure to move along, so which is very much dependent on donation, sponsorship, etc.
And by the way, most of the best universities in the United States are private ones rather than public ones.
That's right. So, and then the other is, where is the autonomy of academic sovereignty? So that's another issue.
Meaning, for the school university and universities to judge whether they want to admit one student or not the other. Is
That's
that
right.
what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay.
So they may really make decision on multiple variables,
Yes.
Not only based on your SAT score or your GPA, etc. And actually, another question is that okay, you can easily tighten up the scrutiny, the control over universities. For example, you have auditing program,
Yeah.
and also you have registration program for certain coaches or even for open houses, etc. But that's going to add the cost of running a university. But eventually, those costs will be, put on
the
those
back of the
students and the parents. So these are really the very questions that need to be answered before people can really go ahead and take revenge against those universities and by placing tougher measures.
It's very interesting what you said, because it's not just an issue in the United States, also an issue in China
Everywhere.
in a way, everywhere,
Yes.
because top cream of the universities are rare numbers. So everybody wants their children to get into the best one. There are so many middle-class parents around the world that want to do that. They would make all the effort that they can.
Yeah,
Sometimes
every day
even in the way that is not legal.
As a professor, also as the previous dean for the school,
Yeah.
every year during the admission period, I'm just pestered and tempted by many people.
You know what you're talking about, I can tell. But having said that, though, social mobility is a very critical issue of our world, particularly when you see, as Mr. Andrew particularly indicated, a technological update of the whole society, and therefore everybody needs to get literacy, technical literacy, and you have to get it through only by going to certain schools and certain level of lifelong education. So that is a big question mark besides what we are discussing right here, the corruption in the admission system. Isn't it, Professor Chambers?
Well, yes. I mean, you have a situation where you have whole segments of the population in the United States that either do not have access to these elite schools or cannot pay for these elite schools. That is another problem. We have to note that the parents who are accused in this scheme, and this is a long-standing scheme, have had the means to keep a certain prosperity and way of life that they want for their children. These are not people who are aspiring to a better life. These are people who want to keep their life and their privilege. So, I mean, this is something that we have to debate here in the United States as well, which is the cost of universities. These people can afford these universities once they're in there. The question is that they're inserting their children in there illegally.
As we have indicated, federal prosecutor did not charge any student or universities with wrongdoing. They said in many cases the students were not aware of their parents were doctoring their test scores and lying to them to get them into the schools. And also, according to Andrew Lelling, the United States Attorney for the District of Massachusetts, the parents are the prime movers of this fraud. According to him, adding that parents use their wealth to create a separate and unfair admissions process for their children. But as we indicated, Mr. Andrews, there is a root cause for that. We can't just blame parents for all the problems. The system was being built in a way that the parents have to take their opportunities no matter what it is. Usually legal, but sometimes also illegal in order to get their kids. So now, since we have been debating for decades about reform of universities, but nobody has a good way of doing it that is fair, efficient, and really going to uplift most of the population as it is today. So what actually other solutions do we have besides keeping the system that we have right now?
Yeah, well, I think there are some solutions. Just coincidentally, the Higher Education Act, which is the piece of legislation that has broad authority to make changes in the higher education, college admissions, etc., is up for reauthorization. Now in Congress we have members like Donna Shalala, who was the immediate past president of the University of Miami. She has direct experience with the college admissions process. There really hasn't been a significant effort to address college admissions, whether you talk about back doors or side doors, or just making sure that there's an equitable pathway for everybody. Since Ted Kennedy was running the Help Committee in the U.S. Senate, and so it's been probably a decade since these issues have been addressed. But the Higher Ed Act is up for reauthorization, and I know Donna Shalala and others that are in Congress are going to be looking at ways to not only close those back doors and side doors, but also, to the point I made earlier, ensuring that higher education today meets the needs of the 21st century workforce, making sure that those tech skills, that coding education is there, and many of those things are less costly than
well, we
the
hope,
traditional
Mr.
path.
Andrews, as you may know, you are not politically naive, as simple as to say that this is going to save the picture, right? We have been seeing reforms one round after another of education in the U.S. as well. Charter school, for example, we heard that debate 10 years ago. No matter what administration has not necessarily handled the education issue well, because it's such a controversial issue. It touches on everybody's life. Therefore, I go to you, Mr. Chambers. You know, one of the things about American universities is that the testing system and the entrance system has its advantages as well. For example, it looks at people's extracurriculum activities. It looks at some of the qualities of the students besides just the scores and the grades. And it collects a group of advisors and teachers in order to give eventually the evaluation. That is a strength. But at the same time, it could also become a weakness if the system is corrupt. So the question really is how to make sure that the system is less corruptive, so therefore it could still function as its good intentions are.
Well, I think that that's why I think some of the changes are going to be small scale in terms of better security, in terms of test taking and identity of test takers, and I think it's going to be small in terms of how athletes are recruited and how they are identified at universities such as Georgetown. Beyond that, I'm not really sure what some policymakers have in mind here, because again, it's very political. There's money involved in this, and we have an entirely other set of scandals with big-time college sports and sports money that we have not even had the courage to look at yet. So will we have the courage to look at this? I'm not really sure. I think it's going to be very small scale in terms of making sure the people who are recruited are really being recruited for these athletic teams, and the people who are taking tests are really the people who they say they are. Beyond that, I really don't have any assurance that we're going to go beyond that.
I see. Professor Liu, also, from a different country's perspective, many of the kids getting into universities, the parents would give them the opportunity to go to extracurriculum schools in order to prep them for the best, for the most important exams. And there needs to be a lot of money and fund in order to support the kids to go through this kind of system. And the system usually creates children with bigger and better scores than the other children who did not go through the same system. So there's also an issue of wealth, even in the prep process for this. So there are a lot of issues about wealth. It's not just about how universities are being evaluated, Professor Liu, from your perspective, in many countries.
Yes. For example, in many of the primary schools in China, they don't teach the right type of stuff in the classroom, but teachers would leave for moonlighting and deliver for money after school courses. So those are really the issues that are very prevalent. But now I think for any educational institution, reputation is really the key. And also people involved, the professors and other faculties, really, the reputation can be destroyed over one very single incident.
Yeah.
So ethical integrity among these people are important. You know, people may rush. So okay, we have quantitative, we have qualitative or quantitative measures, but because you know, the seed for a talent is so complicated, you have to allow subjective judgment of those professors with integrity and with the future orientation.
I know. Time is very limited for this kind of discussion, isn't it? Self-discipline, is that really going to be the real way to achieve fairness? That's a big question mark. For now, I want to thank the three of you, Christopher Chambers, Brandon Andrews, and Liu Baocheng. Really appreciate it.